The city glittered like 1,000 diamonds that night. A crescent moon hung over the skyline, and music spilled out from one of the tallest glass towers in the district. Inside, the elite of the elite gathered. Billionaires, heirs, politicians, and media darlings, each dressed in silk, velvet, and gold. It was the gala of the season, the kind of night people would whisper about for years to come. But in the middle of that sparkling glamour, one woman sharpened her tongue like a blade. Her name was Clara Hastings. To the untrained eye, Clara was beautiful, with sharp cheekbones and flawless skin painted by luxury cosmetics. Her gown shimmered with diamonds, each stone carefully chosen to scream wealth. But behind those jewels was a hunger that glittered even brighter. Ambition. Clara didn't just want attention, she craved it. She lived for the spotlight, thrived on the whispers of envy, and believed every room she entered was hers by default. And tonight, she had one goal, catching the eye of Adrian Cole, the billionaire whose fortune was matched only by his reputation for power. Clara rehearsed every step before arriving, imagining how she would laugh, how she would toss her hair just so, how Adrian would look at her and finally see the woman destined to be by his side. She could already picture the tabloids the next morning. Cole's new flame, Clara Hastings steals the spotlight. But there was one problem. Trailing 2 steps behind her was a young woman whose presence Clara both relied on and despised, her housemaid Lila. Lila wore a plain black dress Clara had picked at the last minute, nothing more than a shadow compared to the glittering gowns around her. She moved quietly, her head bowed slightly, her hands always ready to adjust Clara's hemline, hold her clutch, or fetch whatever Clara demanded. Her beauty was subtle, the kind of beauty that didn't scream but whispered, a soft elegance that drew glances when people thought she wasn't looking. And that, more than anything, infuriated Clara, because deep down, Clara knew. She knew that even stripped of jewels, even with no wealth to flaunt, Lila's grace could eclipse her own. And that thought burned like acid. So Clara used her power the only way she knew how: cruelty. "Lila," she hissed under her breath as they entered the ballroom, her red lips curling into a scowl. "You're wrinkling the train. Honestly, must you ruin everything I wear?" "I'm sorry, ma'am," Lila whispered, smoothing the fabric gently. Her voice carried no malice, only sincerity. Clara rolled her eyes. "Sorry doesn't fix stupidity. Keep your eyes open for once." She didn't care if people heard. In fact, part of her wanted them to. Humiliating Lila was Clara's way of asserting control, reminding the world that she was above others, even the ones she secretly envied. The ballroom itself was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers poured golden light onto polished marble floors. Waiters floated by with trays of champagne, and a string quartet played softly in the corner, their bows gliding gracefully over instruments worth more than some people's homes. Conversations buzzed. Deals were made with a handshake. Alliances whispered behind jeweled fans. It was a world of power, and Clara wanted desperately to prove she belonged in it. Then the room shifted. Like a tide turning, every head seemed to glance toward the entrance. Adrian Cole had arrived. He stood tall, his presence commanding without effort. A tailored suit hugged his frame, understated yet impossibly elegant. His dark hair was combed back, his jaw strong, his expression cool and unreadable. But it was his eyes, steel gray, sharp, observant, that silenced the crowd more than any grand announcement could. He didn't smile, didn't wave, yet somehow every person there felt the weight of his presence. Clara's heart leapt. "This is it," she thought. "This is my night." She adjusted her gown, lifted her chin, and angled herself just right so Adrian would see her. She rehearsed a coy smile in her head, practiced the perfect tilt of her wrist to reveal her diamond bracelet. This was her moment to sparkle. But as Adrian moved through the crowd, Clara noticed something unsettling. His eyes weren't roaming for beauty. He wasn't distracted by the glittering gowns or jewel-encrusted necklines. He observed, quietly, intently, and when his gaze swept in her direction, Clara felt as though he was looking through her, not at her. Her stomach twisted. She hated that feeling, being invisible. So she did what she always did when threatened. She reached for Lila. The maid walked silently behind her, careful not to draw attention, holding Clara's delicate clutch like it contained gold dust. Her head was lowered, but her posture remained graceful despite the burden. Clara narrowed her eyes. To her, Lila's quiet dignity looked like defiance, like arrogance. And in front of Adrian, that was unacceptable. Lila, Clara said suddenly, her voice sharp enough to slice through the nearby chatter. Heads turned. People glanced over curiously. The maid froze. Yes, ma'am. Clara tilted her head dramatically, placing a hand on her hip. You're walking like a turtle. Do you want me to look ridiculous in front of all these people? Lila blinked rapidly, cheeks warming as whispers spread through the crowd. I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean... Didn't mean... Clara cut her off with a laugh that sounded anything but amused. You never mean anything, do you? Yet you keep making mistakes. Tell me, do you even understand how to carry a clutch without making it look cheap? The audience around them stirred. A waiter passing by slowed down, pretending to adjust his tray just to watch. The violinist's bow faltered for a second. People were listening, watching. Clara loved it. Humiliation was her performance, and Lila was her stage prop. The more the maid squirmed, the taller Clara felt. You know what? Clara continued, snatching the clutch from Lila's hands with a snap. She held it high for everyone to see. Do you even know how much this costs? More than you'll ever earn in your miserable lifetime. Don't touch it again with your filthy fingers. Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Some guests turned away in discomfort. Others exchanged scandalized looks. But no one intervened. Not yet. And Clara, drunk on the silence, decided to push further. She noticed Lila now holding a silver tray with champagne flutes, her hands trembling slightly. Clara smirked. Pathetic. And with a flick of her wrist, she slapped the tray. The crash echoed like thunder. Glass shattered across the marble floor. Champagne splashed upward, staining Lila's plain black dress, dripping down onto her shoes. The young maid gasped, frozen in shock, her face burning with humiliation as dozens of eyes drilled into her. And across the room, Adrian Cole's cold, unreadable gaze fixed on the scene. He rose from his chair. The crowd shifted, a wave of anticipation rushing through the hall. Every step he took seemed to echo louder than the music, louder than the whispers. His presence cut through the tension like a blade through silk. Clara's heart raced. She straightened her back, plastered on her best smile, and prepared to bask in the attention. Here it comes, she thought. He's going to acknowledge me. Finally. But when Adrian stopped, his gaze wasn't on Clara. It was on Lila. Are you all right? His voice was calm, deep, steady. The kind of voice that didn't ask. It reassured. Lila's lips parted. She could hardly believe he was speaking to her, in front of everyone. Yes, sir, she whispered, her voice trembling. Adrian slipped a hand into his pocket and pulled out a silk handkerchief. Slowly, deliberately, he placed it into Lila's trembling hands. You don't deserve this, he said, his eyes softening. Not from anyone. The room erupted in murmurs. Some gasped. A few even clapped quietly, unable to contain their approval. And Clara, her world cracked in half. This wasn't admiration. This wasn't the recognition she'd craved. This was humiliation. And for the first time all night, it wasn't Lila who bore it. It was her. If you were in that room, standing among the wealthy and the powerful, what would you have done? Would you have stepped in to defend Lila? Or stayed silent like so many others? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And hey, if you're loving this story so far, don't forget to subscribe for more tales where arrogance meets its downfall. The air inside the ballroom thickened like a storm waiting to break. Crystal chandeliers still shimmered overhead. The music tried to continue in the background, but everyone's attention was chained to one place. The scene unfolding between Adrian Cole, the billionaire whose name alone commanded boardrooms, and Lila, the maid whose humiliation had just been witnessed by hundreds of the city's elite. Clara stood frozen, her lips parting in disbelief. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. This was supposed to be her moment. Adrian was supposed to notice her, shower her with the kind of attention that could catapult her name into the glossy pages of magazines. Instead, he had turned to the servant, the nobody, and worse, he had defended her. For the first time that night, Clara felt small, but smallness never sat well with her. It clawed at her chest, twisted her stomach, burned her skin. So as the crowd murmured and Adrian handed his handkerchief to Lila, Clara snapped back into the only armor she knew, arrogance. "Mr. Cole," she purred, stepping forward with exaggerated grace, her voice louder than necessary so all could hear. "You're far too kind. Really, you mustn't waste your concern on help. These girls are clumsy by nature. That's why they're servants after all." Gasps fluttered through the crowd again. A few people lowered their glasses of champagne, uncomfortable. Others leaned in eagerly, hungry for the drama. Lila flinched, clutching the silk handkerchief like it was the only shield she had. Adrian turned his head, slowly, deliberately, and for the first time his eyes locked on Clara. The steel in his gaze was sharp enough to cut diamonds. "Help?" His voice was calm, but the undercurrent of disdain made Clara's pulse skip. "Is that what you call someone you publicly humiliate for your own entertainment?" The words struck like thunder. Clara's smile faltered, but she forced a laugh, brittle and high-pitched. "Oh, come now, Mr. Cole. Don't tell me you're taking this girl's side. She works for me, after all. She knows her place." The crowd stirred uncomfortably. No one dared step between a billionaire and a socialite, but their eyes betrayed judgment. Whispers flew like sparks. Adrian's jaw flexed as he glanced at Lila again. "Tell me your name," he said gently. Lila blinked, startled. My name, sir?" "Yes, your name." "Lila," she whispered. Adrian nodded. "Lila, not help, not girl, not clumsy. A name. Something you should never forget," he said, his gaze flicking back to Clara with ice in his tone. "No matter how much wealth you drape over yourself." The crowd erupted. Some gasped, others whispered furiously, and a few bold souls even clapped softly at Adrian's rebuke. Clara's face flushed red, a cocktail of rage and humiliation. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not in public, and never by someone as untouchable as Adrian Cole. She began, her voice trembling before she could reel it back into something resembling poise. "You misunderstand. I was only trying to—" "Trying to what?" Adrian interrupted, his tone still calm but cutting. "Prove your worth by tearing down someone else's dignity?" Every syllable was a dagger. Clara stumbled over her words, unable to find footing. Meanwhile, Lila stood silently, still clutching the handkerchief, her cheeks flushed, but her posture slowly straightening. For the first time all night, she wasn't shrinking. Adrian's simple acknowledgement had lit something inside her, something long buried under years of servitude and silence. Clara, desperate to claw back control, turned toward the audience as if they would support her. "Honestly, some of you know how these things are," she said, her laugh thin. "Servants sometimes exaggerate. They play victims to gain sympathy. Don't tell me none of you have dealt with the same?" But the crowd didn't laugh with her. They didn't nod. They stared, cold, disapproving. Her stomach churned. The power she thrived on, the whispers of approval, the envious glances, was slipping like sand through her fingers. Adrian's voice sliced through her desperation. "Respect is not measured by wealth, Miss Hastings. It's measured by how you treat those who can give you nothing in return." The words hung in the air, heavier than the chandeliers above. For a moment silence reigned. The string quartet stopped completely now, their bows suspended mid-air. Even the waiters froze, trays balanced in their hands. And then, like a match to dry kindling, murmurs exploded. "Did you hear what he said?" She humiliated her maid in front of everyone. Adrian Cole defended the girl. Clara felt the room closing in, suffocating her. Her nails dug into her palms. She wanted to scream, to lash out, to undo this nightmare. But there was no undoing. Adrian's words had sealed her reputation in front of the most powerful people in the city. And then came the final blow. Adrian looked directly at Clara and said, loud enough for all to hear, "Miss Hastings, if you cannot find decency in your heart, then you will never find respect in mine." The crowd gasped. To be publicly dismissed by Adrian Cole was more than embarrassment. It was social annihilation. Clara's lips quivered. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. And in that fragile silence, Adrian turned back to Lila. He extended a hand, not to command, not to belittle, but to guide. "Come," he said gently. "Walk with me." Lila's eyes widened. Her first instinct was to refuse. She wasn't meant to walk beside men like him, wasn't meant to stand under the same light. But something in Adrian's steady gaze told her it was all right, that she was safe. Tentatively, she placed her hand in his. The billionaire and the maid walked together through the center of the ballroom, leaving Clara trembling in their wake. And the whispers that followed weren't about Clara's dress or her diamonds or her ambition. They were about the girl who had been humiliated and the billionaire who had stood for her. And just like that, the balance of power shifted. A maid who had once been invisible was now the center of every whisper, every glance. "Tell me, if you were Lila, would you have taken Adrian's hand or stayed in the shadows out of fear?" Comment your answer below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, where cruelty is exposed and dignity rises. The ballroom doors closed behind them with a heavy hush, muting the gossip still buzzing like hornets inside. Adrian's stride was steady, confident, but he kept his grip on Lila's handlight, as though any tighter might scare her away. They walked down the long marble corridor, their footsteps echoing in sync. Lila's heart pounded. She wanted to ask why. Why was he defending her? Why was he wasting his time on her of all people? But her throat was tight, and the words wouldn't come. Finally, Adrian stopped near a quiet alcove where the golden glow of wall sconces softened his sharp features. He turned to her, his expression calm but searching. "Are you all right?" he asked. Lila blinked, surprised. No one had ever asked her that in earnest. Her employers gave orders, demanded perfection, punished mistakes. But concern was foreign. I think so," she whispered. He studied her, as though weighing not just her words but the tremor in her voice. "Good, because no one should endure that kind of humiliation, especially not from someone who thrives on it." Her eyes flicked away. "It's nothing new, sir. I've worked for families like the Hastings before. You learned to survive it." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Survive," he repeated, like the word offended him. "Yes." Lila's voice cracked with quiet resignation. "I don't have the luxury to fight back. A roof, food, wages, those depend on silence. If I spoke every time someone treated me like less than human, I'd have nowhere to sleep." Adrian leaned back slightly, studying her with something like admiration hidden under his controlled exterior. "Yet you endured tonight with dignity. That says more about you than their wealth ever could." Lila shook her head quickly. "You don't understand, sir. People like Clara, they always win. They always walk away untouched." Adrian's lips curved into the faintest smirk, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "Not always." Lila shivered, not from fear, but from the strange certainty in his tone. Meanwhile, back in the ballroom, Clara was crumbling. She had plastered on a smile, had lifted her glass as though nothing was wrong, but inside she was unraveling. People avoided her gaze. Some even whispered loud enough for her to hear. "Did you see Adrian's face? She's finished. Who humiliates their own maid in front of him?" The words cut deeper than she could admit. When the music picked back up, Clara excused herself to the powder room, gripping the marble counter so tightly her knuckles whitened. "This isn't over," she hissed at her reflection, her eyes flashing with venom. "I won't be made a fool by some servant girl, not in front of Adrian Cole, not in front of anyone." And in that moment, Clara's humiliation hardened into something far more dangerous. Revenge. Hours later, the gala ended. Guests departed with murmurs still fresh on their lips. Adrian escorted Lila out discreetly, ensuring she wasn't left vulnerable to more stares or whispers. At the curb, a black car waited. Adrian turned to her one last time. "Take this," he said, slipping a business card into her hand. Lila froze. His card? The card of Adrian Cole? "I don't understand," she murmured. "Call me," he said firmly. "If anyone tries to harm you, If anyone threatens your place or your livelihood, you reach out to me directly." Her breath hitched. "Why? Why would you?" "Because decency," he interrupted gently, "is the least the world owes you." For a moment their eyes locked, and something unspoken hummed between them, an understanding, fragile yet undeniable. Then he stepped into his car, the door closed, and he was gone. Lila stood frozen on the sidewalk, the cool night air brushing her cheeks, Adrian Cole's card burning like a brand in her palm. Clara, however, was already plotting. Back in her family's mansion, she paced her room in a frenzy, her sequined gown still clinging to her. Her mother tried to calm her, urging her to forget it, but Clara couldn't. "No," she spat. "Do you know what this means? Everyone will talk. Everyone will remember Adrian humiliating me, and all because of her." Her mother's lips tightened. "Clara, let it go. Adrian Cole is too powerful." "Then I'll go after the girl," Clara interrupted, her smile sharp as glass. "If Adrian Cole thinks she's worth defending, let's see what happens when she has no job, no home, no standing at all. I'll strip her down to the nothing she was born into." Her laughter was low, cruel, and thus the game began. The next day, Lila tried to go about her duties as though nothing had happened. She scrubbed the silver, arranged the flowers, pressed the linens, but whispers swirled among the staff. "Did you see her with Adrian Cole? They say he defended her. She left with him." Lila kept her head down, cheeks burning, but the reprieve didn't last. By afternoon, Clara descended on the servants' quarters, her heels clacking like gunfire against the marble floor. "Lila!" Her voice sliced through the air. Lila froze mid-step, dread crawling up her spine. "You humiliated me," Clara hissed, seizing her arm. "In front of everyone. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I didn't." Lila tried to protest, but Clara's grip tightened. "Oh, but you did, and you'll pay for it. Mark my words, you'll regret ever stepping into that ballroom." Lila's chest squeezed. For the first time, Adrian's card in her pocket felt less like reassurance and more like a lifeline. And here's where the storm really brews. Clara's pride won't let her rest, and Lila is caught in a trap she never asked for. Tell me, if you were Lila, would you call Adrian for help now, or would you try to fight this battle on your own? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe for more twists like these. The morning after the gala, the Hastings estate buzzed with whispers. Clara had made sure of it. Servants scurried nervously, speaking in hushed tones that died the moment Lila walked into a room. She felt the weight of their stares, though no one said it to her face. Clara was sharpening her claws. By midday, the inevitable blow came. "Lila," Mrs. Hastings called coldly, her lips pressed tight, her pearl necklace glinting like armor. "Pack your things." Lila's stomach dropped. "Madam, You've embarrassed this family," Mrs. Hastings cut in, her voice dripping venom. "Do you think we don't know what happened last night? You paraded yourself like a desperate creature, drawing Adrian Cole's attention, humiliating my daughter before society's elite. We cannot keep a servant who invites disgrace." Lila's lips parted in shock. I didn't ask him to." "Silence," Mrs. Hastings snapped. "You will leave this house today. Your wages are terminated. And if you think of seeking employment elsewhere, know this. Our influence stretches far. One word from us, and no respectable household will take you." Her knees wobbled. "Please, where will I go?" "That is not my concern," Mrs. Hastings said coolly. "Clara will never be humiliated again because of you. Consider this your final warning. Leave quietly and perhaps we'll forget you exist." And just like that, her world crumbled. Lila spent the afternoon packing her few belongings into a small cloth bag. The other servants avoided her gaze, fearful of Clara's wrath by association. When the heavy front doors slammed behind her, Lila stood on the steps of the grand estate with nowhere to go. The sky hung heavy with gray clouds, and for the first time in years, she felt utterly invisible. She wandered the city streets until night fell, her bag clutched to her chest, the cold biting through her thin coat. Every inn she passed turned her away. No references, no money, No chance. At last, exhausted, she sat on a bench beneath a flickering street lamp, tears stinging her eyes. Her fingers brushed the folded card in her pocket, Adrian's card. Her heart thudded. She had sworn not to rely on anyone. She had built her survival on silence, on enduring. But Clara's threat echoed in her head. You'll regret ever stepping into that ballroom. And she realized she already did. Her hand shook as she pulled out the card. The name Adrian Cole gleamed under the lamplight like a lifeline. She whispered to herself, "What choice do I have?" And with trembling fingers, she dialed the number. Across the city, Adrian was finishing a late meeting when his phone buzzed. The caller ID was unknown. He almost ignored it, until instinct told him otherwise. He answered, "Adrian Cole." For a moment, there was only silence. Then a voice, soft and breaking. "Mr. Cole, it's Lila." Adrian sat straighter, his jaw tightening. "Lila, what happened?" Her words tumbled out, ragged. "They dismissed me. They said I ruined Clara, that no one will hire me again. I have nowhere to go." For the briefest second, Adrian's control slipped. Anger flashed in his chest, sharp and hot. "Where are you?" he demanded. She gave him the street corner where she sat. "Stay there," he ordered, already standing, already moving. "Don't move until I arrive." 15 minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up beside the bench. The back door opened, and Adrian himself stepped out. Not a driver, not an assistant, but Adrian. Lila rose to her feet, startled. "Mr. Cole, you didn't have to." "I said I would," he interrupted firmly, "and I keep my word." Her eyes burned with unshed tears. "Why are you doing this? I'm no one. I'm just a maid." Adrian's gaze softened, though his tone remained steady. "Don't ever say that again. You are not just anything. They stripped you of your dignity because it was convenient for them, not because you lacked worth." Lila's lips parted, but no words came. For the first time in her life, someone had spoken of her like she mattered. "Come," Adrian said, guiding her into the car. "You're not spending another night out here." The ride was quiet but not uncomfortable. Lila stared out the window, the city lights blurring past, her thoughts tumbling. "Where are we going?" she asked at last. "To a place where you'll be safe," Adrian replied. "I have apartments reserved for staff who travel with me. One of them is empty. It will be yours until you're back on your feet." Her throat tightened. "I don't know how to repay you." "You don't need to," he said simply. "But perhaps, someday, you'll understand why I can't watch injustice and remain silent." Lila studied him quietly, sensing there was more behind his words than he revealed. But while Lila found a fragile reprieve in Adrian's protection, Clara was only fueling her fire. When she learned Lila hadn't vanished as planned, when whispers reached her that Adrian Cole himself had taken her in, Clara's rage turned volcanic. "She's living under his roof?" she shrieked, smashing a vase against her bedroom wall. "That gutter rat has wormed her way into Adrian's life? No, I won't allow it." Her mother paled. "Clara, leave this alone." "Never," Clara snarled. "If Adrian thinks she deserves pity, then I'll prove to him she's nothing but a liar. I'll dig up her past. I'll ruin her in ways she can't recover from. When I'm done, not even Adrian Cole will be able to protect her." And in that moment, Clara's obsession shifted from humiliation to complete annihilation. Clara just crossed the line. This isn't about pride anymore. It's about obsession. Lila's caught in a storm she never chose, and Adrian's protection might not be enough. What do you think Clara will dig up about Lila's past? Let me know your theories in the comments. And remember, subscribing helps you catch the next twist as soon as it drops. The Hastings mansion was silent, but Clara's room glowed with lamplight well past midnight. She sat at her vanity, her reflection staring back at her with wild, furious eyes. Her hands trembled as she dialed a number on her phone. The man who answered spoke in a gravelly voice. "Ms. Hastings, I wasn't expecting your call." "You'll earn double your rate," Clara hissed. "I need everything on a girl named Lila. She was a servant here, but she's not what she seems. Adrian Cole has her under his protection now." The man chuckled. If she's just a maid, what's the threat? Clara's grip on the phone tightened. Adrian doesn't waste his time on nobodies. He sees something in her, and if I can expose it, destroy it, I'll have him back at my side. A pause, then, send me what you know. I'll start digging tonight. Clara hung up, her pulse pounding. She stood before the mirror, brushing her hair furiously until strands broke loose. This is war, she whispered to her reflection, and I will win. Meanwhile, across town, Lila stood in the quiet of Adrian's penthouse apartment, staring out at the glittering city skyline. The place felt unreal. Marble floors, towering windows, soft lighting. But even surrounded by such luxury, Lila couldn't shake the gnawing unease in her chest. She turned as Adrian entered the room, his jacket off, his sleeves rolled up, looking less like the untouchable billionaire and more like a man. Is it too overwhelming? He asked gently, noticing her expression. Lila bit her lip. I don't belong here. Adrian stepped closer. You don't belong on the streets either. You belong somewhere you're respected. Somewhere you're safe. Her eyes lifted to his. Safe. The word felt foreign on her tongue. He studied her for a long moment, then said softly, You've lived without safety for a long time, haven't you? Her throat tightened. She wanted to answer, to explain, but years of silence and secrets held her back. Adrian didn't push. Instead, he changed the subject. Tomorrow, I want you to come with me. There's a charity luncheon. You don't have to speak, just observe. I want people to see you by my side. Lila's eyes widened. By your side? Adrian, that will make things worse. Clara will. I'm not worried about Clara, Adrian said firmly. Let her throw tantrums. The world doesn't revolve around her. But Lila wasn't convinced. Deep down, she knew Clara would never stop. The next day, Clara's investigator sent her the first report. Your little maid has secrets, the man said over the phone. Her name isn't even Lila, not really. It's short for Delilah Carter. She grew up in a foster system, bounced from home to home after her parents died in a suspicious fire. She dropped out of school at 16 and worked under-the-table jobs until she landed in your household. Clara's heart pounded. A foster girl? She sneered. No wonder she clings to Adrian like a lost puppy. There's more, the investigator continued. The fire that killed her parents wasn't an accident. There are rumors her father was involved in something shady, money laundering, maybe even worse. Clara's eyes glittered with cruel delight. Perfect. That's exactly what I need. Careful, the man warned. If you spread something like this, it could backfire. Adrian Cole isn't a fool. But Clara was already imagining the headlines. Billionaire Adrian Cole linked to maid with criminal family ties. The scandal alone would be enough to bury Lila. Oh, Adrian, Clara whispered to herself, when I expose her, you'll see she's beneath you, and you'll come crawling back to me. That night, Lila woke in Adrian's apartment to a nightmare. Smoke, flames, screams. She sat up in bed, her chest heaving, sweat dampening her nightdress. Her hands shook as she pressed them to her face. She hadn't dreamed of the fire in years. But Clara's venom, being cast out, it had unlocked something inside her she had buried deep. The memory of her parents' voices, the way the flames had consumed everything, the smell of burning wood and ash that clung to her hair for days after. She whispered to herself, it wasn't an accident, was it? The next morning, Adrian noticed her pale face over breakfast. Did you sleep at all? He asked. Lila forced a smile. I'll be fine. But Adrian didn't buy it. He leaned forward. Lila, you don't have to tell me everything, but you can't keep carrying all of it alone. Her hands tightened around her teacup. For a moment, she almost told him about the fire, about the whispers she'd overheard as a child that hinted her father wasn't innocent. But fear sealed her lips. Instead, she shook her head. It doesn't matter anymore. But Adrian's sharp eyes lingered on her, filled with unspoken understanding. Back at the Hastings mansion, Clara was already planning her next move. She called her mother and father into the sitting room. I've uncovered everything about her, she announced. The girl's family were criminals. Her very existence is a stain on Adrian's reputation. Mrs. Hastings frowned. Clara, you mustn't. I must, Clara snapped. Don't you see? Adrian won't listen to me. But he will listen to the world when I ruin her name in society. When they all know who she really is, he won't dare keep her around. Her father's jaw tightened. This is dangerous, Clara. If Cole retaliates, he could crush us. But Clara only smiled coldly. Let him try. And with that, she made the call to her favorite gossip columnist. And just like that, Clara has lit the fuse. She's about to drag Lila's darkest past into the public eye, no matter the cost. But here's the question. Do you think Adrian will turn on Lila when the scandal breaks? Or will he protect her at all costs? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you're hooked, because this storm is only getting started. The next morning, whispers spread through the city like a sickness. It started with a single article in the Daily Echo. The headline read, Billionaire Adrian Cole linked to maid with criminal past. The shocking truth about Lila Carter. The piece dripped with venom. It painted Lila as the daughter of a disgraced man who had laundered money through shell companies before dying in a suspicious fire. It questioned how Adrian Cole, one of the most eligible and powerful men in the country, could possibly tarnish his reputation by associating with a servant girl of questionable blood. By noon, every society lady was clutching her pearls. At salons, at luncheons, at high-end boutiques, the whispers followed the same pattern. Have you heard about Adrian Cole's maid? Disgraceful. She's dangerous, just like her father. And at the center of it all was Clara Hastings, sipping champagne in her drawing room, pretending innocence as the news spread like wildfire. Meanwhile, Lila stood frozen in Adrian's penthouse, the newspaper trembling in her hands. Her name was there, her past laid bare for the world. Her voice cracked. They know. Adrian, they know everything. Adrian stepped forward, his jaw clenched in fury. He ripped the paper from her grip and tossed it aside. This is garbage, lies wrapped around half-truths. Tears blurred Lila's vision. But it's enough to ruin you. They'll drag your name through the mud because of me. Adrian's voice thundered through the room. Do you think I care what they say? She flinched at the intensity in his tone, but then he softened. He took her trembling hands in his. Lila, they can talk all they want. I know who you are, and no article can change that. Her lips trembled. But your world, your empire, Clara won't stop until she takes it all away. Adrian's eyes burned with determination. Then it's time I show Clara Hastings exactly what happens when she crosses me. That evening, Adrian made a bold move. He didn't hide. He didn't retreat. He arrived at the charity luncheon with Lila at his side. The room fell silent the moment they entered. Every eye followed them. Whispers buzzed like a hive of angry bees. Clara sat at a nearby table, dressed in glittering emerald. Her lips curved in triumph. She had expected Lila to crawl into the shadows, too ashamed to ever show her face again. But here she was, by Adrian's side. Adrian guided Lila to the center of the room, his hand firm at the small of her back. Then with a commanding voice, he addressed the crowd. Some of you have read the trash printed this morning, he began, his gaze sweeping the room. And I'll make this clear once and for all. Yes, Lila Carter's life hasn't been easy. She's endured hardships most of you in this room can't even imagine. But let me tell you something. None of it makes her unworthy of respect. None of it makes her unworthy of compassion. And it certainly doesn't make her unworthy of me. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Clara's smile faltered, the glass in her hand trembling. Adrian continued, his voice sharp as steel. If anyone here wishes to judge her because of the actions of her parents, then they should also be prepared to have their own skeletons dragged into the light. Because let's not pretend any family in this room is spotless. Eyes darted nervously. Some guests looked away, ashamed. Adrian's final words cut like a blade. Lila Carter is under my protection, and if anyone thinks they can smear her name again, they'll answer to me. The silence that followed was deafening. Then slowly, applause began. Hesitant at first, but soon the room filled with clapping. Not everyone joined, of course, but enough did to make a statement. Adrian turned to Lila, his expression softening as he whispered, "You're not alone anymore." Her eyes shimmered with tears, not of shame this time, but of something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Across the room, Clara was seething, Her plan had backfired spectacularly. Instead of destroying Lila, she had given Adrian the stage to declare his loyalty publicly. Clara's hand tightened around her champagne glass until it cracked in her grip. "This isn't over," she whispered. And just like that, Adrian silenced an entire ballroom of critics with one powerful declaration. "But Clara, she's not finished. Not by a long shot. If you were in Adrian's shoes, would you have stood up for Lila the way he did? Or do you think he just painted a bigger target on both of their backs?" Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you're hooked, don't forget to subscribe for more stories just like this one. Clara Hastings was not a woman who accepted defeat. The applause that followed Adrian's speech at the luncheon haunted her like a bitter echo. Instead of humiliation, Lila Carter had been lifted higher than ever. And Adrian? He had declared war on anyone who dared whisper against her. But Clara wasn't finished. That night, in the gilded silence of her study, Clara poured herself a glass of cognac and made a call. A voice answered on the second ring. Cold, efficient, dangerous. "It's time," Clara said. "Dig into Cole Enterprises. Every deal, every contract. I want something, anything I can use to tear him down. If he wants to protect that maid, then he'll watch his empire burn for her." The man chuckled darkly. "Consider it done." Meanwhile, Adrian and Lila were beginning to believe the worst was over. For the first time in weeks, Lila slept without nightmares. She dreamed of a future where she could walk beside Adrian without shame, where she wasn't defined by her father's sins. But peace never lasts long in a war. 3 days later, Adrian's phone rang at dawn. His chief financial officer was panicked. "Sir, there's been an incident. Someone leaked internal documents to the press. Contracts, offshore accounts, boardroom minutes, things that were never supposed to see the light of day. The media is calling it the scandal of the decade." Adrian's grip on the phone tightened. "What kind of documents?" The answer chilled him. "The kind that could be twisted to look like fraud." By noon, every news outlet was ablaze with headlines. Cole Enterprises under fire. Allegations of tax evasion and fraud. Billionaire's empire in crisis amid scandal. Stocks plummeted. Investors panicked. Reporters swarmed the streets outside Adrian's building. And once again, Clara Hastings sat in her glass-walled penthouse, watching the chaos unfold on live television, her lips curling in satisfaction. "Checkmate," she whispered. In the middle of the storm, Lila stood at Adrian's side. She watched the man who had once seemed untouchable, the pillar of strength, the unshakable titan, now fighting to keep his empire from collapsing. Her heart twisted. "Adrian," she whispered, "this is because of me. Clara's doing all this because of me." But Adrian shook his head, his voice firm. "No, Lila. Clara is doing this because she's desperate. She thinks she can scare me into walking away. She doesn't realize she just made the biggest mistake of her life." That evening, Adrian called a meeting in his private boardroom. His closest advisors, his attorneys, his CFO, they all gathered with grim faces. But Adrian's tone was calm, controlled. "Clara Hastings believes she can destroy me with lies and leaks. What she doesn't know," he said, sliding a file across the table, "is that I've been preparing for this for years." Inside the file was a thick stack of documents, evidence, recordings, signatures. Proof of Clara's illegal dealings, from bribing inspectors to laundering money through shell charities. One of his advisors looked up in shock. "Sir, this is enough to ruin her, to put her behind bars." Adrian's lips curved into a cold smile. "Exactly. She came for my empire. Now I'll take hers." But before the hammer could fall, Clara made one final, reckless move. She arranged a gala, one dripping with excess and grandeur, and invited every reporter, every socialite, every business rival she could summon. It was a trap. At the height of the evening, Clara took the stage, her emerald gown glittering under the lights, and with a theatrical pause, she held up a stack of papers. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice ringing with false righteousness, "tonight I reveal the truth about Adrian Cole. He is not the man you think he is. He is a liar, a fraud. And here," she waved the papers, "is the proof." The crowd gasped. Cameras flashed. Lila clutched Adrian's arm, her heart racing. But Adrian? He didn't flinch. He stepped forward, his voice a thunderclap across the hall. No, Clara. Tonight it's your truth that gets exposed. He snapped his fingers, and his legal counsel stepped onto the stage carrying a briefcase. Adrian opened it in front of the cameras, revealing stacks of documents, Clara's own forged contracts, her trail of corruption. Gasps rippled through the crowd again, this time in Clara's direction. Her smile faltered. This is fake. Lies. But Adrian's counsel spoke firmly. These documents have already been submitted to the district attorney's office. Clara Hastings, consider this your final performance. The hall erupted in chaos. Reporters rushed forward. Guests whispered furiously. Clara stood frozen, her empire collapsing around her as her carefully curated facade shattered. Lila, standing beside Adrian, watched in awe as the man who had defended her honor now dismantled the woman who had tried to destroy them both. For the first time, she realized this wasn't just about power. It was about love, and Adrian had just proved he was willing to risk everything for her. Clara thought she had Adrian cornered, but in the end, her schemes backfired in spectacular fashion. Now the world knows who she truly is. But here's the question. Did Adrian go too far, or was this the justice Clara deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that'll keep you hooked. The fallout from that night was immediate. By morning, every news outlet carried the same headline. Clara Hastings exposed. The Queen of High Society faces criminal investigation. Clara's name, once a symbol of wealth and elegance, now dripped with disgrace. Business partners cut ties. Investors fled. Even her so-called friends, the same women who once clung to her at luncheons and whispered in her ear at soiree, now turned their backs. But Clara Hastings had always thrived on control, and losing it drove her to the edge. 3 days later, she sat alone in her penthouse. The chandeliers were dim. Half her staff had already quit. Boxes of subpoenas cluttered her dining table. She stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her once perfect hair was in disarray. Her eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with fury. They think they've beaten me, she whispered, her voice cracking. But I won't let them win. Not him. Not her. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. A shadowy contact, one who didn't care about law or reputation, only results. I need this fixed, she hissed. Adrian Cole. That maid. They ruined me. Do whatever it takes. The man's voice on the other end was cold. That will cost you. Money is no object, Clara snapped, her voice shrill. Just make them disappear. Meanwhile, Adrian and Lila were beginning to breathe again. For the first time in weeks, they took a walk together in Central Park. No disguises, no fear. Just the two of them, hand in hand. Children laughed nearby. Street performers played violins under the autumn leaves. For a fleeting moment, Lila thought maybe, just maybe, life could be normal. But as they crossed a quiet path, Adrian's instincts sharpened. His hand tightened on hers. Don't look, he murmured, his tone steel. We're being followed. Lila's breath hitched. What do you mean? 3 men, back left. They've been on us since we left the car. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Clara! Adrian nodded grimly. Clara. That night, Adrian doubled his security. His penthouse transformed into a fortress. Guards at every entrance. Surveillance cameras monitoring every angle. But Lila couldn't shake the fear. Adrian, she whispered, sitting by the window, her voice trembling. She won't stop. She'd rather burn the world than see us happy. What if she hurts someone? Adrian crouched before her, taking her hands in his. Lila, listen to me. She's desperate. Desperate people make mistakes, and when she does, I'll be ready. Clara, however, was unraveling. Her hired men had failed twice, once at the park, once outside Adrian's office. Each time, Adrian's security intercepted them. The tabloids began whispering about Clara's descent into paranoia. Photos of her storming out of law offices, screaming at reporters, spread across the internet. She was no longer the untouchable socialite. She was a cautionary tale. But instead of retreating, Clara grew more dangerous. If she couldn't destroy Adrian with schemes or hired men, she would do it with her own hands. The night came without warning. Adrian had invited a few close allies to his penthouse for dinner, a small gathering to celebrate surviving the storm. Lila was radiant in a simple silk dress, her smile brighter than it had been in months. For the first time, it felt like victory. Then, crash. The sound of shattering glass tore through the penthouse, the room froze, and there she was, Clara Hastings, wild-eyed, disheveled, clutching a small pistol in her shaking hand. "You ruined me!" she screamed, her voice breaking into sobs. "Everything I built, everything I was, gone, because of you. And her!" Gas filled the room. Lila's face went pale. Adrian stepped forward, his tone calm but edged with steel. "Clara, put the gun down. Don't you dare talk to me like I'm some criminal." Clara spat, her hand trembling. "I was everything. I was the queen of this city. And you—" Her eyes snapped to Lila, venom dripping from every word. "You were nothing. A maid. How dare you stand where I once stood?" Tears burned Lila's eyes, but she stood firm, clutching Adrian's arm. And then Clara raised the gun. The world slowed. Adrian moved instinctively, shielding Lila with his body. "Clara," he shouted, "if you do this, there's no coming back. You'll lose everything, your freedom, your life. Don't let your hate finish what it started." But Clara's face was twisted with rage, her finger tightening on the trigger. The room tensed. Every second stretched like an eternity. And just as the shot rang out, bang! Security surged forward, tackling Clara to the ground. The gun clattered across the marble floor, sliding out of reach. Screams echoed. Guards pinned her down. Clara thrashed, her voice raw and broken. "No! No, she doesn't belong here. She'll never belong." But the words fell on deaf ears. Sirens wailed in the distance. The queen of high society, once untouchable, was dragged away in handcuffs, screaming into the night. When silence finally settled, Lila collapsed into Adrian's arms, shaking. He held her tight, his voice steady. "It's over, Lila. She can't hurt you anymore." But as Lila buried her face against his chest, she whispered the truth neither of them could ignore. It's never really over. Not when hate runs that deep. And just like that, Clara Hastings' empire crumbled. Not with elegance, not with dignity, but with handcuffs and disgrace. But here's the question. Do you think Clara got what she deserved, or was she simply a victim of her own pride? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more jaw-dropping stories. The city buzzed for weeks. Clara Hastings' dramatic fall from grace was no longer just society gossip. It was history in the making. Every channel, every paper, every online blog ran the story. The Queen in handcuffs. Clara's face, once gracing luxury magazine covers, was now plastered on tabloids with captions like, "From diamonds to desperation, and how the mighty have fallen." The footage of her storming into Adrian Cole's penthouse with a gun became viral. Millions watched it on repeat, jaws dropping at how far the once unshakable socialite had fallen. Her trial was the most sensational event of the year. Reporters swarmed the courthouse. Protesters shouted outside the gates. Inside, Clara sat at the defendant's table, her once glamorous frame reduced to something brittle, desperate. She faced charges of attempted assault with a deadly weapon, conspiracy, and reckless endangerment. Her lawyers tried everything: pleas of mental instability, claims of provocation, even wild accusations that Adrian had orchestrated it all. But the evidence was stacked high. Her threatening calls, her hired men caught on camera, the witnesses from Adrian's dinner party. The jury didn't take long. Guilty. Clara Hastings' scream echoed through the courtroom, a sound that chilled even those who once adored her. For Adrian and Lila, the verdict was a bittersweet relief. Adrian, though hardened by years in the ruthless business world, couldn't help but feel a twinge of sorrow watching Clara led away in cuffs. Once she had been powerful, respected. Now she was a broken woman, consumed by hate. But his sorrow was fleeting, because as he glanced at Lila, sitting quietly by his side, he knew what really mattered. She was safe. She was his, and their lives, scarred though they were, had survived the fire. Weeks later, Adrian stood at the grand unveiling of his company's newest headquarters. The scandal with Clara had nearly shaken his empire to the ground, but he had rebuilt it stronger. Investors returned, confidence soared, and this new building, gleaming against the city skyline, was proof that Adrian Cole was far from defeated. By his side, Lila stood tall, not as a servant, not as a victim, but as a partner. She had traded her maid's uniform for a sleek designer dress Adrian had insisted she wear. But more than her attire, it was the light in her eyes that silenced the whispers. She no longer shrank in the shadows. She no longer looked down when people stared. She met their eyes, head held high. At the celebration, a reporter approached, her microphone extended. Mr. Cole, one question. After everything that happened with Clara Hastings, how do you feel standing here today? Adrian paused, his hand instinctively finding Lila's. He gave a small smile, then spoke into the cameras. I feel grateful. Grateful for second chances, grateful for loyalty, and most of all, grateful for the people who stand by you, not because of wealth or power, but because of who you are. The cameras flashed. The crowd applauded. But it was the way Adrian turned to Lila, brushing a soft kiss across her hand, that made the headlines the next day. Still, life wasn't magically perfect. At night, Lila sometimes dreamed of Clara, the rage in her eyes, the venom in her voice. There were moments she wondered if she truly belonged in Adrian's glittering world, if people would always see her as the maid who got lucky. But Adrian never let those doubts take root. You don't belong in this world, Lila, he told her one evening as they watched the city lights from his balcony. You define it with your kindness, your strength. You've reminded me what all this is supposed to mean. Her throat tightened as she leaned against him, and for the first time, she believed it. Meanwhile, Clara sat in a cold prison cell. The walls were bare. The air smelled of iron and dust. Her manicured hands were gone, her jewelry stripped. Her reflection in the scratched metal mirror showed someone she no longer recognized. Every day she replayed the night of the gala in her head. The slap, the humiliation, the gasps of the crowd. Every day she asked herself how it had come to this. And every day the answer was the same: pride. Pride had built her empire and pride had destroyed it. But outside those walls, the world moved on. Adrian's empire grew. Lila began using her position to help others, funding scholarships for women from humble beginnings. Just like her, she became more than just Adrian's partner. She became a voice, an inspiration. And though the scars of the past would never fully fade, they had built something stronger in their place: resilience, hope, and love. And that's how a single act of cruelty spiraled into a downfall no one saw coming. Clara Hastings thought she could break a maid to prove her power, but in the end, her pride broke her. Do you think Adrian and Lila's love will last, or do scars like these always find a way back? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget, subscribe for more stories that will keep you hooked until the very last second. Months slipped into a year. The city had changed, and so had Adrian and Lila. Their love, once born out of scandal and fire, had weathered storms no one else could have survived. Now it wasn't whispers of the maid and the billionaire that filled the air. It was admiration, respect, because together they had built something unshakable. On a quiet spring morning, Adrian stood in his penthouse garden, watching the sunrise spill gold across the horizon. Behind him, Lila stepped out, her robe loosely tied, her hair tumbling around her shoulders. She carried 2 cups of coffee, setting one beside him. Thinking again? She teased softly. Adrian smiled, wrapping an arm around her. Always, but lately, it's less about what I've lost, more about what I've gained. He pressed a kiss to her temple, and for the first time she believed he wasn't haunted anymore. Weeks later, in an intimate ceremony far away from flashing cameras and prying headlines, Adrian and Lila exchanged vows. It wasn't in a cathedral or a ballroom. It was in a garden, under blooming cherry blossoms, surrounded only by those who truly mattered. No stage lights, no reporters, just love. When Adrian slipped the ring on her finger, Lila's eyes filled with tears. Not because of the diamond, not because of the promise of wealth, but because this man, this billionaire who could have had anyone, chose her, the maid he once hired, the woman who once scrubbed floors in silence, and she had chosen him, not for his empire, but for his heart. Yet even as they moved forward, the shadows of the past had one last card to play: Clara Hastings. From her prison cell, she wrote letters, dozens of them, some angry, some bitter, but others strangely repentant. She wrote of loneliness, of regret, of nights spent staring at the ceiling, wondering how it all unraveled. And one day Adrian received one of those letters. He read it in silence, his face unreadable. Lila stood nearby, uncertain whether to ask. Finally, Adrian folded the letter and set it aside. "She's broken, Lila," he murmured. "But maybe, in a way, this is her punishment, to live with the truth of what she destroyed." They never replied. Clara Hastings faded from the world's memory, a cautionary tale of pride and cruelty. Adrian and Lila, however, did not fade. Together they launched foundations, schools, hospitals. Lila in particular became a symbol for young women across the country. Proof that where you start doesn't define where you end. People no longer called her the maid who caught a billionaire. They called her the woman who changed him and the world with her kindness. On the night of their first wedding anniversary, Adrian raised a toast in a room filled with friends and allies. "To my wife," he said, his voice steady, warm, "to the woman who reminded me that power without love is hollow, and that love without courage is fleeting. Thank you, Lila, for being my courage." The room erupted in applause, but Lila only smiled through her tears, whispering back to him, "And thank you, Adrian, for seeing me when no one else did." And so, what began with a slap at a glittering gala ended in a love story stronger than anyone could have imagined. Clara Hastings tried to crush a woman she thought beneath her, but in the end, she only revealed the strength that lay hidden all along. What do you think? Would you have forgiven Clara, or would you let her rot with her regrets? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit subscribe, because more heart-pounding, jaw-dropping stories are on the way.